Good morning, everyone. Today's lesson is called The Second Egypt, the days of Yahushua's retribution on the descendants of Rome and Edom, where we're going to talk about the current events that are happening as we speak. 2025 is going to be a year that will change life on planet Earth. It will affect every single human being on earth. There is an attempt to turn the hands of time back where God's people are again oppressed in the land of their captivity. Our enemies are afraid that black people are waking up, and they're trying to put us back into the dark ages so that they would have the levers of power to put us back in bondage firmly under their control in mind and in body. It is a white backlash, if you will, because the cats have gotten out of the box and they're not sure how to put them back in. They're not sure how to stop the woke movement. So they have attempted to say that it has something to do with homosexuality and waking up to that, which the woke movement of God's people has absolutely nothing to do with homosexuality. It has nothing to do with the conservation of planet Earth. It has to do with God's people waking up to the lies of history that have been told by the descendants of the Greeks, the Romans, and the Edomites, and those that call themselves Jews that are really European Gentiles. We're going to talk about all of this. We're going to talk about this new president that we have and what he's trying to do as he pushes hard to put us back in the dark ages where this false religion called Christianity becomes the standard, becomes our new taskmaster, that everyone is forced to give up their freedoms and their ideal and be pressed into the mold of Christian conservatism, and is all led by our new president and the cult that he have cultivated for the last 4 years. Let us open up in a word of prayer. We have a lot to discuss. We definitely won't finish today, but we'll get a good start on it. Yeshua, we come to you once again, and we ask that you open up our minds, and that you open up our hearts, and that you continue to wake up your people in the face of opposition. Father, we pray also that you would use these new tactics that our enemy has hoisted on us to give us a sense of a common enemy so that we can unite once and for all and stand up against our enemies. Stand up and shout out the truth, that we might stand up to the lies and manipulations of history, that we might take our rightful place with you. We ask all of this in your holy name. Amen and amen. Let's jump in. Last week we talked about the first captivity of God's holy people. We talked about the time that God's people was in bondage in Egypt under Pharaoh. The Israelites at first was welcomed in Egypt because of Joseph's testimony and his godly ways and his wisdom. But then a king arose that did not know Joseph. They have somehow downplayed or erased his history, and this person became afraid that God's people would turn against them and side with their enemies. So they began to oppress and badly mistreat God's people. We talked about the judgments of Egypt last week, how Pharaoh did everything he could to keep God's people in Egypt because he needed their labor. A dictator needs someone to dictate and rule over. So he needed God's people to be there, and he was not going to let them go. But God brought the most powerful nation on earth to its knees. It didn't matter what Pharaoh wanted. It mattered what God had promised to do for his people. He brought 10 plagues on Egypt that left Egypt in ruins and finally took the life of Pharaoh and his entire army, drowning drowning them in the Red Sea. Through all of that carnage that God brought upon the heads of Pharaoh and the Egyptians, he protected his people. He says he will also do the same in the last days. Yes, our enemy may want to keep us in bondage, and they may be turning up the pressure on God's people, but that only indicates one thing, that the end of their civilizations is near. And that is where we're in. It started in 2019, and it's been one heck of a ride since then. That's when the birth pain started. God is turning up the heat on the children of Japheth, the father of the white people, the father of the Anglos, who have pitted themselves not only against God, but against God's holy people. They have also allied themselves with our half-brother, Esau. We call them the Edomites. They have become one peoples long, long ago and united against God's people to oppress, enslave, and destroy them eventually. But just as God made a difference between the Egyptians, which were Gentiles, and his people, who are the descendants of Seth, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God will protect his people. So we need not be afraid. We need to come back to our God. We need to begin to understand what has been taken from us and come back to our God. We need to bend the knee, not to Jesus, but to Yeshua. We need to call upon his holy name, and he will hear us because we are his people. We have his ear. Time is up. Time is running out for our oppressors. To control a peoples, you must first control what they think about themselves and how they regard their history and how they regard their culture. Once they've been made to feel ashamed of themselves and ashamed of their culture, you no longer need chains to hold them. Not at all. We need to understand that we do have a culture. We need to understand that we do have a rich history. We need to understand why the world hates us. It hates us because we are the apple of God's eye. There are no peoples on earth like us. There are no people on earth that heard the literal voice of the Creator that lives outside of time, the Almighty, the one that has always existed. We heard his voice, meaning our ancestors. They heard his voice. Yes, we are a special people that he had picked out for his name's sake. We do have a culture and we have a history like no other peoples on earth has.
Depending on the environment you grew up in, will determine the outcome of your reality. So this is a society where the wicked socially engineer criminals, socially engineering our women and putting them up on a pole. We're the only ethnic group that degrade our women in our music. Who's having us to do that? Who know who we really are? Because when we wake up and find out who we are, and that the nearly 100 million of our ancestors who were at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, when their prayer went up that God would free generations after them, we're at that time of the woke culture. While people are waking up, but they're being manipulated to do this or manipulated to do that. Have a beef in your song. Why this brother? And his followers now hate your followers.
Separation.
See, the biggest enemy to black progress, it's not white people, it's not Jewish people, it's not Asians, it's ignorance.
Our enemies are angry that we're waking up. They're doing their best to try to keep our children, this next generation, from learning our true history. They're trying to make them afraid again. They're trying to make them feel ashamed of who they are. They want to teach the history that is a lie because they feel like they're the victors, but they haven't read the last chapter of this story yet, which is beginning to be written by Yeshua. And in this chapter, everything is turned around. We win. They try to call it critical race theory that is being taught in school. They're trying to say that if we teach any other narrative like the truth, that we are somehow twisting history and making their children feel ashamed of what their ancestors have done, what their forefathers have done to God's holy people. So they want us silenced. They don't want our history to be told. They want to whitewash the truth of history. But God says, no, it's going to ring from the rooftops and from the mountaintops. The truth will be known. And even if you can shut us up for a while, God knows the truth. And he says, I will punish you for everything that you have done. And I will punish your children for what you have done to my holy people. He says, let my people go, or I will continue to destroy you, just like he destroyed Pharaoh in the first Egypt. But God knows that you won't let us go, but one day you will. When you really sit down and ask yourself, why don't you want us to know our history? What are you afraid of? I think everyone knows that you've enslaved us and badly mistreated us for 400 years, but there's something more. And what that something more is that we migrated from what you call the Holy Lands, and we call it Northeast Africa. And we fled into all parts of Africa by tribe. The tribe of Judah fled into West Africa, and your ancestors stole us from there and put us in bondage because we disobeyed our God. And he promised for 400 years he will allow this. But after the 400 years, which ended in 2019, all hell is going to break loose on earth. And it won't be us doing it, because we're not like you. We're not warmongers, and we're not those that commit genocide. It will be our God that will destroy you. It will be our God that will rescue us. You will not be able to shut him up. The day of reckoning is coming. Your time is up. Listen at this next video.
We're the only race told to forget our history, while others are reminded of their history to prevent repetition. They ask for our support in their struggles but dismiss our past. We're expected to entertain, share ideas, and then watch them get stolen. It's disgusting. In a doctor's office, they check your medical history to understand your current condition from the last time you were there. But with Black history, they ignore it. We're deeply hated, valued only when profitable or beneficial to others. They don't see us as human unless there's something in it for them.
The false culture that we have been taught teaches us with mental pictures and with words. It teaches us that anything black is bad, dark, and evil, and anything white is good, wholesome, and holy. Black is dirty and bad. White is clean and good. We've been so brainwashed that we believe that a white rat makes a better pet than a black rat or a gray rat. The lighter it gets, the cleaner it feels, because we have been psychologically manipulated in this culture to think that way. So naturally, when we look in the mirror, we apply that same standard to our own self-worth. This is why lightening creams are so popular around the world, even though they cause all kinds of medical problems. This is how effective these lies have been that has been told to God's holy people. Listen at this next video.
We don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. It's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure, high, and clean. But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful.
Look at this next video. It gives you a glimpse of what Europeans ate, their culture, etc., prior to the Moors coming in and teaching them how to bathe and teaching them what was unwholesome to eat. Before that, they were eating things like mummies in medieval Europe. It was a delicacy in their time, but they twisted history to make God's people feel like their made-up history. We were the uncivilized barbarians who did not know how to bathe, who knew nothing about math and education and astronomy. They twisted history and turned it upside down. The history that they have tried to lie and say was our history was actually their history, so that whiteness can appear to be clean and wholesome, and blackness is considered to be dirty and unclean and filthy. Look at this next video. It will give you a glimpse into a bit of real medieval European history. Take a look.
Munching on mummies, bursting with maggots, bird droppings bread, Europeans in the Middle Ages weren't just relieving themselves everywhere. Their diet was bizarre beyond words. When you time travel to a medieval feast, you'd find mummies on the table, steaks and bread covered in bird droppings, along with pastries crawling with maggots and all sorts of outrageous stuff plus more. The reason mummies are so rare now, Europe gobbled them up till they were all gone. In the bizarre history of medicine, people in the Middle Ages believed every part of a mummy was a treasure, capable of curing tumors, gout, plagues, poisonings, and even syphilis. Yup, syphilis. So, mummies were grilled into steaks, ground into powder, used as seasoning for red wine bread, and even turned into paint. Mummy brown. Now a lot of famous paintings bear their mark. Europeans feasted on mummies from the 12th to the 20th century. The whole thing started, all because its name sounded similar to a drug called bitumen. So, unscrupulous merchants simply claimed eating mummies could cure all diseases. From then on, eating mummies became a craze across Europe, leading to such a demand that eventually, Europeans started making mummies out of Europeans for Europeans to eat. Nice. Not only did medieval Europeans eat humans, but they also ate maggots. Their bread was so hard, it could literally kill a person. The Italians came up with a solution, leaving the bread outside to attract flies to lay eggs. When the eggs turned into little maggots, the bread was fermented. Biting into a maggot-filled bread was a mouthful of protein. To stand out as nobles, their dining habits were extravagantly unique. After baking the bread, they hollowed it out and stuffed in small birds. When sliced open, countless chirping birds would come pouring.
Listen at this next video. This is why they do not want critical race theory or our true history to be taught in schools, because it will scare those that have oppressed us. They know that God will punish those who mistreat and abuse his holy people. They know that the future is ours, and they know that the real people of God are black. And they also know that they've badly mistreated us right up until this very day. They believe that forbidding our history to be taught in school will stop God's wrath from coming to them. They think it will stop God from ordaining 144,000 of us that cannot be touched by any weapon made by men, and that they will stand against the system and they will be invincible. Listen at this next video, and they definitely will be black. And because they're black, they will be scary to the world, because they've made the world fear blackness as being evil, when in fact it is just the opposite of that. We are not the ones with the history that they have. We are not the ones that have committed genocide over and over and over again. We are not the ones that start wars and division and killing everywhere they go. That is their history, not ours.
They know that this is God, chosen people, and this is their land. And 144,000 has already been awakened, regaining the memories, and soon to have their powers. When this solar flash hit the cabal, won't know what to do with them.
Listen at this next video. We have been taught to read scripture without thinking about what it says. We need to remember that Yeshua HaMashiach, he lived among the Egyptians, the black Egyptians, for 3.5 years, hiding among the Egyptians that looked just like him. If he were white, God would have sent him to Europe to hide, or some other place. He would not have sent him specifically to the Egyptians. Often the Israelites, when trouble came, they would run into Africa to hide among the descendants of Ham. They were actually descended from Noah's son Shem. So we need to think when we read the scriptures. Joseph's brothers could not distinguish him from the Egyptians, nor could Pharaoh distinguish Moses from one of his own grandchildren. Think about those things. Listen at this next video.
You know that the Egyptians could not distinguish Joseph from their own people. Let's take that into context. Egypt is a state, a country in Africa. So African people, they would be looking like them. They could not distinguish Joseph from the Egyptian. That means that he was as dark as the Egyptians and had the Egyptian African-like features. Again, Joseph's brothers, when they came to him, if the Jews were pale-skinned like the Israelites that we see in Israel now, Joseph's brothers would have been able to distinguish him from the other Egyptians. However, when they came to buy grain from him in the great famine in Genesis 40:44, they could not distinguish Joseph from the native Egyptians. Ponder on that. Did you?
The time for the oppression and mistreatment of God's people is over. The birth pains has started. This is God's next phase, where he will punish those that mistreated and enslaved his people, just like he punished Pharaoh in the first Egypt. Not only did he punish Pharaoh, he punished his people. He destroyed his entire system, and he destroyed his entire nation. He took the life of Pharaoh along with his entire army, drowning them in the Red Sea. They wanted to come and slaughter God's people, but God would not allow it. He opened the Red Sea and blocked his enemies' way. He miraculously protected his people and brought them through the Red Sea on dry ground, bringing them to safety, while he destroyed those that have oppressed, enslaved, and misused his people for almost 400 years. And I believe he's doing the same thing today. This is what we're experiencing with the upheavals of the weather. It seems as if everything is beginning to go wrong, terribly wrong. We're in an entire new time frame. We're going to see things that we won't be able to explain initially, but I believe our enemies will begin to understand very soon where God is going with this. We need to be careful what we ask for. The beginning of the road to destruction that led to slavery, bondage, and the people of God's enemies taking them into captivity, enslaving them, and badly mistreating them. This one act was the beginning that led God's people into this terrible situation. It marked the beginning of sorrows for their history and the history of their ancestors. They did not want God to rule over them any longer. They asked for a king. They wanted to be like the nations round about them. They wanted to worship their gods just like the nations around about them, because they made gods of wood and stone that they could see. They made them in the form of birds and animals and all kinds of things. They wanted to be just like those people, burning incense and sacrificing their children in the fire and doing all the things that the foolish Gentile nations who did not know God did. They worshiped gods that could not hear or speak. They made up religions that they followed. But God says that you do not want to follow the living God, the one that you cannot see and live. Listen at these scriptures as I read them, because they're doing the same thing that we are doing today. We ask for a king because we do not want God to rule over us anymore. We want a man to fix everything for us rather than calling on the living God. 1 Samuel 8:4-9. Finally, all the elders of Israel met at Ramah to discuss the matter with Samuel. Look, they told him, you are now old, and your sons are not like you. Give us a king to judge us like all the other nations have. Verse 6. Samuel was displeased with their request and went to the Lord for guidance. Verse 7. Do everything they say to you. The Lord replied, for it is me they are rejecting, not you. They do not want me to be their king any longer. Verse 8, ever since I brought them from Egypt, they have continually abandoned me and followed other gods, and now they are giving you the same treatment. Verse 9, do as they ask, but solemnly warn them about the way a king will reign over them. Samuel warns against the king. Verse 10, so Samuel passed on the Lord's warning to the people who were asking him for a king. Verse 11, this is how a king will reign over you, Samuel said. The king will draft your sons and assign them to his chariots and his charioteers, making them run before his chariots. Verse 12, some will be generals and captains in his army. Some will be forced to plow in his field and harvest his crop, and some will make his weapons and chariots and equipment. Verse 13, the king will take your daughters from you and force them to cook and bake and make perfume for him. Verse 14, he will take away the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his own officials. Verse 15, he will take 1/10 of your grain and your grapes harvest and distribute it among his officers and attendees. Verse 16, he will take your male and female slaves and demand the finest of your cattle and donkeys for his own use. Verse 17, he will demand 1/10 of your flocks, and you will be his slaves. Verse 18, when that day comes, you will beg for relief from this king you are demanding, but then the Lord will not help you. Verse 19, but the people refused to listen to Samuel's warning. Even so, we still want a king, they said. Verse 20, we want to be like the nations around us. Our king will judge us and lead us into battle. Verse 21, so Samuel repeated to the Lord what the people had said. Verse 22, and the Lord replied, do as they say, and give them a king. Then Samuel agreed and sent the people home. 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1 and 2. Verse 1, there was a wealthy, influential man named Kish from the tribe of Benjamin. His son Saul was the most handsome man in Israel, head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the land. So they picked this person based on the way he looked. They didn't listen at God about his character. They didn't care about his character. In other words, they did not care that he was a narcissist. They just wanted to be like all the nations round about them. Do you know we're making the same mistake? Not only are we making it, we have already made that mistake. And so now we have someone to rule over us who does not know God, who will be an enemy and father oppress God's people, trying to separate them from their God, from being prosperous in this land. He's already taken many steps already to oppress God's holy people. We need to be careful what we ask for. We need to turn to God and not men. Listen at this next video. It will explain more of what I just said.
And so then Samuel goes and he looks at the sons and he chooses the tallest and most handsome one. And what does that punk do? He runs off. No, you can't run. I'm picking you as the king. And he was evil. Tried to kill David. Tried to break up the relationship between David and Jonathan. Donald Trump is King Saul. Because you know what America said? We want a king. Oh, we want a king. Can we give us a king? Give us a king. So in his speech, I think that God saved me from the assassination because God wanted to make America great again. No, I think it's a little different, Don. I think God said, America, I'm going to give y'all the desires of your heart. Now, biblically, it does not mean that the desires of your heart actually means it's good. It means God will give you the desires of your heart. And so then Samuel goes and he looks at the sons.
Already our king is at work. He already took the ban off of companies so that they can now discriminate openly against God's holy people because of the color of their skin. Many white people think that black people are not as intelligent as a white person. So if you base it on merit, because of their false thinking, God's people will not be able to make a living in this country, turning the hands of time back the way it was prior to our affirmative action, prior to the government getting involved and making laws preventing discrimination in the workplace and in housing and in other areas of our society. He also banned Black Lives Matter flags from being flown on buildings. And so the oppression of our king, who happens to be a narcissist, is in full swing. The end times are near. I believe not only are they near, I believe they are here. The birth pains are already on their way. They're getting closer together and they're getting more intense. So hang on to your hat. 2025 will be a year of testing. The fabric of this nation will be tested. God's wrath and anger on the nations who mistreated and misused God's people is coming, and they will feel the sting of his great and awesome power. So hang on to your hat. God's people have suffered tremendously since 70 AD. We've suffered because of our disobedience to our God. Listen at one of our own saying about the sorrows that we have been through.
Just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will.
Remember, Africa, its ancient name is called the Garden of Eden. This is the most blessed, fertile, and rich continent on the entire planet. Without the natural resources God has implanted here for his people, if it wasn't for the blessings that God has blessed his people with in their land, the world and its modern civilizations could not exist. Take a look at this video and give it some thought, because it illustrates how God has blessed the land of his holy people.
Imagine if the entire African continent became one single country. How would it reshape the world? If Africa merged into one country, it would be called the United States of Africa, becoming the largest country in the world. Its geography is almost perfect for global dominance due to its central location in the world, which allows it to control major trade routes and influence global commerce, because it also has the world's longest coastline, stretching over 30,500 kilometers, making sea trade much easier all over the world. The United States of Africa would also hold the title for the 6th largest GDP in the world, valued at $3.1 trillion. Africa's population stands at 1.5 billion, making it the most populous country in the world. With leadership under a single ruler, the region would experience greater stability, leading to significant investments from the world's largest companies. It would also control some of the world's most important choke points, like the Strait of Gibraltar, the Suez Canal, and Bab el-Mandeb, allowing it to collect significant revenue from these vital trade routes.
Someone said that Africa was a S-hole. I can't say the word, but you know what I mean. Because their history has been hidden. Their history has been distorted. The richness of the continent of Africa has been exploited through colonization and greed and genocide. Africa was civilized before any of the other nations was civilized. But because its people sinned against their God, he allowed their enemies to overtake them and exploit their land, taking the wealth and the benefit of that wealth away from the people of God, causing them now to be poor. God's people never were a warlike people. God's people did not live by the sword, and therefore it was very easy for those who does live by the sword to conquer his people if they were not walking lockstep with their God. Listen at this next video.
If they tell you Africa is a remind them that Africa is the cradle of humanity, where every person's story began. It's the birthplace of the world's oldest university, Al-Qarawiyyin, founded in 859 AD in Morocco, and the land where steel was first forged in Tanzania over 2,000 years ago. The pyramids of Giza stand as testaments to engineering brilliance, while the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela in Ethiopia showcase exceptional craftsmanship. Africa is home to the ancient walls of Benin, 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China, and the mighty empires of Mali, Ghana, and Songhai, rich in trade, gold, and knowledge. Timbuktu's libraries preserved knowledge of medicine, law, and philosophy. Africa's contributions are vast, from the Ashango bone to Ethiopia's healing practices. Africa is not a shtli. It's a land of brilliance, resilience, and countless contributions that shaped the world.
Our oppressors have put it in the minds of the peoples of this world that black people are less intelligent than other ethnic groups, but that could not be farther from the truth. It is the way they measure intelligence. That is the real problem. Listen at this next video. God has done some special things for his people. He's given us a substance called melanin, and he's given us more of that than he's given any other ethnicity. It gives his people certain advantages and certain benefits. We are indeed a unique people. Not only are we a unique people, he put us in a unique land, a land filled with milk and honey and many, many other natural resources, more than any other continent on this planet. Listen at this next video. It will give you some insight on the intelligence of God's holy people.
Facts about your melanin. 1. Intelligent. Did you know that melanin is not only in your skin, but in your body? Africans have the most melanin out of any other race. The more melanin you have, the more intelligent you are. This is because melanin helps store more information in the brain. That's why black children learn way faster than other children.
As a result of God's people's disobedience, God allowed the Europeans to come in and carve up Africa. Not only did they carve it up, they colonized its people, bringing in false religion and strange customs. They did all of this to exploit the land. However, because of malaria, they were not able to live there, and therefore the continent remained largely melanated with God's holy people. God knew that this time would come, and I believe that's the reason he put in the blood of his people a natural agent that will enable them to live in Africa even though malaria exists there. He put something in our blood that none of the other nations have. That is why we are suited to live on the continent of Africa. Listen at this next video. It will tell you about the exploitation and how the colonial nations carved up Africa without consulting its people, but is not theirs, and God will one day take their hands off. In fact, that movement have already started.
Africa, the cradle of humanity, was carved up by European powers in one of history's most ruthless land grabs. The Berlin Conference of 1884 to 85 saw nations like Britain, France, Germany, and Belgium slicing up the continent without consulting a single African leader. France took Algeria and Senegal, while Britain claimed Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. Belgium seized the Congo, and Germany grabbed Cameroon, Tanzania, and Namibia. These colonizers exploited Africa's resources, dividing communities and reshaping borders forever. The colonization of Africa led to exploitation, cultural erasure, slavery, and deeply rooted economic and social inequalities. But Africa fought back, and its nations eventually reclaimed their independence.
Listen at this colonizer talk. He actually made a slip in his broadcast where he actually told the truth about his intentions and the intentions of his nation accidentally. Listen at this next video, because his true intent is to come in with a Bible and with smooth talk and promises, but his main aim is duplistic. His main aim is to exploit the natural resources of Africa without putting any of that money back into the infrastructure of the African countries that he exploited. This is a common practice of our colonizers.
Based on current circumstances, then we should look to Africa, which is where the preponderance of these minerals are. How can we help foster the public-private partnerships, bringing American capital and expertise and standards to Africa so that we can keep exploiting, so that we can
Did you hear
exploring.
Today's story has been shaking up the political world in a way you wouldn't expect. It involves a bold move from Burkina Faso's president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and an unexpected snub to none other than the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. You heard that right. The heat is on, and here's why Captain Ibrahim Traoré just rejected an invitation to attend Trump's inauguration this coming Monday, January 20th, 2025. Now, you might be wondering, why would Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old leader who took power in Burkina Faso in 2022, refuse such a high-profile invitation from one of the world's most controversial figures? Well, let's break it down. First off, Traoré's leadership has been anything but ordinary. He came into power following a military coup, promising reforms and a return to stability for his war-torn country, which has been struggling with insurgent attacks in the Sahel region. So, it's no surprise that his international diplomacy is more focused on his country's security and economic needs than symbolic gestures. Now, let's talk about the big news. Captain Traoré turned down an invitation from Trump to attend his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States, scheduled for January 20th, 2025. And this wasn't just any diplomatic invitation. It was a personal invitation from Trump, extended in the spirit of reinforcing ties between the U.S. and African nations. But Traoré's rejection is making headlines.
Why?
Well, here's the kicker. He cites more pressing matters at home, specifically focusing on combating insurgency and securing Burkina Faso's borders. He's making it clear that his priorities lie at home. Now, some of you might be wondering, why is this such a big deal? Sure, international diplomacy is complex, but this is far from just another rejection of a state invitation. Captain Traoré's move shows that he's willing to stand his ground and prioritize his nation's sovereignty over international photo ops. And given the ongoing instability in the region, this rejection could signal a deeper message. He's not playing the political game for show. He's focusing on what truly matters. Now, here's where it gets interesting. January 7th, 2025, was a day of pomp and ceremony, celebrating the democratic transition of power in Ghana. President John Mahama was inaugurated amidst a sea of dignitaries from around Africa. But one visitor stood out, and that is Captain Ibrahim Traoré.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yes. Good. Thank you.
Captain Traoré arrived not just with his charisma but with a holstered pistol, sparking a mixture of awe, concern, and debate about diplomatic protocols. This move was seen by some as a breach of security, while others viewed it as a statement of resilience from a leader combating insurgency back home. The attendance of Ghana inauguration by Captain Ibrahim Traoré might have forced Trump to also try his luck. However, there's more to the story. By rejecting Trump's invitation, Traoré is also sending a message to the U.S. and the West. He's showing that his leadership isn't swayed by foreign influence. This rejection could have long-term diplomatic consequences, especially as the U.S. looks to increase its involvement in African security and development. Is this a sign of growing tensions between African leaders and the West? Will Burkina Faso double down on its independent foreign policy, or will they shift their stance in the future?
What happens when a nation's most promising leader faces the greatest threat to his life and power on the very first day of a new year? The news of an assassination attempt on Ibrahim Traoré, the 35-year-old president of Burkina Faso, sent shockwaves across the globe, making one thing abundantly clear. The battle for Burkina Faso's future has become a life-or-death struggle. On January 1st, 2025, as the world celebrated the start of a new year, Traoré's enemies wasted no time in attempting to end the life of a leader who represents the very essence of resistance against the Western colonial legacy. This is no ordinary coup attempt. This is a bold, violent response to a leader who has been publicly defying global powers, rejecting Western influence, and most importantly, presenting a new vision of African independence that threatens the status quo. So, who is behind all this? Who stands to gain from the destabilization of a country that was once a symbol of Western dominance? Traoré came to power with one key message: Burkina Faso must chart its course, free from the shackles of colonialism. His vision was simple yet radical: reclaim the country's resources, restore sovereignty, and remove the influence of foreign powers, particularly France, which had long exploited Burkina Faso's gold mines and other natural resources. Why is a 35-year-old African leader becoming a global icon while Paris burns with jealousy? This happens when a colonial empire meets an unyielding leader. And you won't believe, but France tried, and failed, to eliminate President Ibrahim Traoré a staggering 18 times. Burkina Faso, led by its fearless young president, has dared to challenge centuries of French dominance, and the consequences are shaking the world. But how did Traoré save his position and his life? Let's find out. In October 2022, Ibrahim Traoré became the youngest leader in Africa at just 35 years old. His rise wasn't marked by political privilege or wealth, but by a groundswell of public support. Traoré was a captain in the military, a man who understood the struggles of his people because he lived them himself. His ascent came during a time of deep crisis. Insurgency was rampant, poverty was suffocating, and the people had lost faith in their leaders. What made Traoré's rise so extraordinary wasn't just his age, it was his unyielding determination to confront Burkina Faso's challenges head-on. Unlike the politicians who came before him, Traoré didn't make empty promises. Instead, he offered a vision of sovereignty, of a Burkina Faso that could stand on its own 2 feet.
There are many things to do. There are challenges awaiting you. Don't focus on your age. Don't just see that ambition may not be as high as you imagine, but you must aim very far.
But Traoré didn't stop at words. From the moment he took office, he began dismantling the systems of exploitation that had kept his country in the shadow of its former colonizer, France. His speeches, often raw and unpolished, resonated deeply with the people because they were authentic. Traoré wasn't just a leader, he was one of them. A man who understood the pain of seeing his nation's wealth benefit others while his people suffered. Yet, his rise wasn't welcomed by everyone. Traoré's bold actions quickly drew the ire of France, a nation that had long profited from Burkina Faso's resources. But what exactly made Traoré such a threat to Paris? To understand France's animosity toward Traoré, you need to look beneath the surface. Literally, Burkina Faso is one of the largest gold producers in Africa, and for decades, much of that wealth flowed to France. Through lopsided trade agreements and corporate deals, French companies controlled the gold mines, extracting immense profits while leaving little for the people of Burkina Faso. Traoré didn't just disrupt this arrangement, he shattered it. By nationalizing key industries and prioritizing local ownership, he cut off one of France's major sources of income. But Traoré's resistance goes beyond economics. France's relationship with its former colonies isn't just financial, it's deeply symbolic. For centuries, France maintained its influence in Africa through a combination of military presence, cultural dominance, and political interference. Traoré's actions challenge all of that. By expelling French troops and shutting down French businesses, he's sending a clear message: Burkina Faso doesn't need its former colonizer. This defiance is what makes him such a threat to France. It's not just about losing access to gold, it's about losing control over a narrative that has kept Africa dependent on the West. But Traore's fight isn't just against France. It's a fight for his people, and it's a fight that requires bold, unprecedented action.
Fiery speech delivered by Captain Ibrahim Traore, the president of Burkina Faso and notably the youngest president in Africa, it is essential to provide some critical context. This unapologetic and defiant speech was delivered in Ghana, just hours after French President Emmanuel Macron made highly provocative remarks during a speech on January 6th. In his address, Macron accused African leaders of showing ingratitude following the expulsion of French troops from several African nations. These troops were removed over their inability to effectively combat terrorism in the region. Macron further insinuated that these leaders lack courage and failed to address the rising wave of anti-French sentiment sweeping across the Sahel, a sentiment fueled by widespread resentment of France's lingering neo-colonial practices in its former colonies. In his address, he made it clear that Burkina Faso is determined to overcome its challenges, resist imperialism, and forge a path of unity and progress for Africa. Traoré began by emphasizing Burkina Faso's military efforts against terrorism, highlighting the ongoing operations that are inflicting significant losses on adversaries. He stated resolutely, "We will win this battle, this war, and we will overcome imperialism, which has activated terrorism in our region to bring us back to colonial times." He underlined Africa's awakening and warned against external forces seeking to divide the continent or impose their will. Africa is waking up, and no one will be able to close the eyes of Africans on our realities. Captain Traoré emphasized the importance of Pan-Africanism and solidarity among African nations. He extended his support to Ghana's newly elected President John Mahama, urging Burkinabe citizens living in Ghana to assist him in overcoming the numerous challenges ahead.
In January 2024, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger announced their withdrawal from the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS. It was a monument decision that shook the very foundation of the regional bloc. Since then, ECOWAS has tried every possible strategy, including threats and diplomatic measures, to persuade Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso to return to the bloc. However, all of these efforts have been futile, as the three countries remained resolute in their decision. And now, ECOWAS has finally gotten the message and has decided to work with the new bloc established by Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. But why the change of heart? And what does this mean for regional stability in West Africa? Let's find out. Following the coup in Niger, relations between the three military leaders and the regional bloc began to break after ECOWAS threatened a military intervention in Niger. This led to several months of tension between both parties that finally came to a head in January 2024, with the announcement made by Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. According to the joint statement released by the three countries, the decision to withdraw from the bloc was made in complete sovereignty, and the reason for this decision was because the bloc had moved away from the ideals of its founding fathers and Pan-Africanism after nearly 50 years in existence. The statement further added that ECOWAS, under the influence of foreign powers, betraying its founding principles, has become a threat to its member states and its populations, whose happiness it is supposed to ensure. In addition to this, the statement accused ECOWAS of failing to assist the three countries in fighting existential threats like terrorism. In other words, these three nations have been battling with insecurity and terrorism. ECOWAS, as a regional bloc, has never offered to help, but the bloc was the first to impose stringent sanctions on these countries following the coup. Now, following this announcement, the regional bloc refused to acknowledge the withdrawal of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso from the bloc and has tried multiple strategies to bring them back. This is because ECOWAS understands how important Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are to the bloc. During the 92nd Ordinary Session of the Councils of Ministers held in Abuja, Nigeria in July, the president of ECOWAS, Omar Touré, revealed that ECOWAS risks disintegration unless Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso return to the bloc. He added that the decision of the three countries could worsen insecurity in the region. The president then highlighted that freedom of movement and a common market of 400 million people were some of the major benefits of the near 50-year-old bloc, but that these were under threat if the three countries left. During this meeting, President Omar ended his speech with a threat to Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, in an attempt to convince them to return to the bloc. He stated that funding of economic projects worth over $500 million in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger could also be stopped or suspended unless they return to the bloc. However, this was not enough to persuade the three Sahel countries to return to the bloc. Their commitment to their decision was further reaffirmed with the establishment of a new regional bloc, the Alliance of the Sahel. This was another blow to the regional bloc, already looking for ways to convince the three countries to return. The establishment of the AES Confederation made it clear that there would be no going back for Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso.
Let us ask you something. Would you believe if we told you Africa is about to shake up the world? Yeah, Africa. The same continent that's been overlooked and underestimated for centuries. And it's not doing it alone. It's teaming up with BRICS. You've probably heard of them, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and many new nations are on the line to join. Together, they're flipping the global script in a way that's making the old powers nervous. Sounds wild, doesn't it? Well, stick around, because we are going to break it all down. And this isn't just some wishful thinking. Africa and BRICS are doing things right now that could change the entire game. Let's talk about it. All right, let's dive even deeper into this big picture. Africa isn't just another continent. It's the continent when it comes to untapped potential. Think about this. It's home to over 1.4 billion people. That's more than Europe and North America combined. But here's the real twist. This isn't just any population. It's the youngest in the world. The median age is 19. 19. Let that sink in for a moment. That's an entire generation of innovators, builders, and dreamers. Millions of young minds with fresh ideas, ready to shape the future in ways the world hasn't seen before. Unlike aging populations in Europe or Japan, where the workforce is shrinking, Africa's youth are bursting onto the scene at a time when global demand for workers, innovation, and problem-solving is higher than ever. You see, this is a generation that's digitally connected. They've grown up with smartphones, social media, and access to information that their parents could only dream about. They're not just looking for jobs, they're creating them. In Nigeria, for instance, tech startups are springing up faster than anywhere else in the world. In Kenya, young entrepreneurs are using mobile money platforms like M-Pesa to launch businesses in remote areas. This isn't just about numbers, it's about energy, ambition, and a hunger for change. And then there's the land. Africa holds 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. Let's break that down for you. While other regions are running out of room to grow food, Africa is sitting on the planet's last great agricultural frontier. If managed properly, this land could feed not just the continent, but the entire world.
Next week, we will talk about the judgments that God is going to bring on the nations that have abused, enslaved, and exploited his people for over 400 years. Not only America, he will punish the entire Anglo system of power and oppression that has been hoisted for so long against God's holy people. They freed us from slavery. However, we were still enslaved. We were enslaved by the elements. We were enslaved by poverty. We had nothing. They took everything away from us, and they continued their exploitation of God's holy people. They excluded us from participating in the American dream. They gave us no hope if we tried to participate in the system that all other Americans enjoyed. We were terrorized, hung, raped, killed without mercy. There was no real law that protected us from the mobs. Look at these next series of videos. It will give you an idea of why God is bringing the judgment that he's going to bring on the Anglo power structure called Babylon the Great. Yeshua says time is up for our oppressors. This year is going to be a terrible year of judgment. God tells his people, do not be afraid. I will protect you, just like I protected your ancestors in Egypt. Listen at this next series of videos.
America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps. But it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
The dress code. Mr. Garrett, you are out of order, sir. I'm not finished. Out of order. You can't get a loan. You can't own a home. You can't start a business. Mr. Garrett, you have been warned. Which means you can't build wealth. Mr. Garrett! And you're excluded from the American dream. Sergeant at Arms, remove the witness. Why is it so important to you to exclude an entire race of people from the American dream?
Let's talk about the dark history of why jails were created. In 1863, black slaves were freed, but it was more like a setup. After the Civil War, where 179,000 black men fought hoping for equality, the government turned prisons into a new form of slavery. By the 1880s, over 30,000 inmates were locked up, most of them black. Many were falsely accused and forced into hard labor, digging levees, building railroads, picking cotton, and mining coal for companies. Even kids weren't spared. George Stinney, a 14-year-old, was electrocuted in 1944 for a crime he didn't commit. Then, in the 1990s, the crime bill signed by Joe Biden made things worse, leading to mass incarceration that hit black and brown communities the hardest. The truth is, black people were never truly freed. Our fight for equality continues, and we must stay woke.
Why are they looking for the excuse? What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
That's a part of it, and that grows out of something else. You can't thingify anything without depersonalizing that something. If you use something as a means to an end, at that moment you make it a thing and you depersonalize it. The fact is that the Negro was a slave in this country for 244 years. That was a willful thing that was done. The Negro was brought here in chains, treated in very inhuman fashion, and this led to the thingification of the Negro. So he was not looked upon as a person. He was not looked upon as a human being with the same status and worth as other human beings.
Why? Look at this last video. Our oppressors are going to try to put us back under Jim Crow laws. They've already removed affirmative action laws so that the white establishment and business community, academic community, can openly discriminate against God's people once again. Who knows how far it may go? It may go into housing, it may go into jobs, even buying an automobile or any other thing, because the agency that regulates that in Washington has been done away with. Even putting a Black Lives Matter flag in a window has now become illegal. Teaching true history in school is called critical race theory now. That has been discontinued and outlawed. They're attempting to put us back in a cage. But listen at this last video. I think God has something to say about that. I will see you next week, where we will go into the judgments that is currently happening, not only in America, but around the world. It is the beginning of birth pains. It is the beginning of sorrows. Until next week, shalom. Listen at this next last video.
That you are not going to let us go. So God is going to contend with you. I don't think you can win that one. For the scripture says he has treasured up snow in the north for that great day of battle. You haven't seen snow like you're going to see it. He's bringing hail
and snow and floods and tornadoes and hurricanes. He takes the air that you breathe and brings the temperature down so low that when we breathe it in our lungs, it freezes our lungs and death approaches. He will take the temperature all the way up in the summer into the 90s, and in the twinkling of an eye drop the temperature down in the 30s. So while your pores are open for summer, winter comes and you die from disease. You can't fight God and win. He turns nature against you, and he's doing that as we speak.
I have a question for people. Why is it when you all find out that the real Hebrew Israelites are dark-skinned, that you all claim that it doesn't matter? And why is it when the true Hebrew Israelites start to educate others about the truth of our identity that was stolen from us and exposing the lies that have been taught and passed down for centuries, you start to flip the script and claim that we are somehow focused on race and causing division? Why do you westernized Christians, when we explain to you that we are descendants of the transatlantic slave trade and are in fact the real tribe of Judah, the true Jews, and that the Ashkenazi Jews are in fact the synagogue of Satan referred to in Revelations 2 and 9, you all proceed to tell us we are no longer God's chosen people, and that now the church is the chosen people and have replaced the true bloodline? Is it because your hidden racism that lies behind peace and fake equality when you state there is no Gentile or Jew in Christ? Is it your fake Christianity and religion that was built on lies and persecution and the enslavement of my people, the reason why you continue to reject the truth? Or is it due to your indoctrination that has entrapped you so much so that you have cognitive dissonance when you are given the truth? See, the truth is this: lies do matter. Lies matter because we know that the Bible declares that the truth will make you free.
So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived, and stood up upon their feet, an exceeding great army. Then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, Our bones are dried, and our hope is lost. We are cut off for our parts. Therefore prophesy, and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves, and cause you to come up out of your graves, and bring you into the land of Israel. And ye shall know that I am the Lord, when I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves, and shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Then shall ye know that I the Lord have spoken it, and performed it, saith the Lord.
Expect to see more of what you see on the screen as 2025 gets on their way. God is serious. He's already brought pestilence and new diseases, which we'll talk about next week. The planet is warming up. As a result, we have no idea of what kind of upheavals that we're going to endure. This is all punishment for what the Anglo nations has done to his people. Take a good look. Until next week, God bless you.